Her tech CEO asked his virgin best friend for a child. But when she gave herself fully, because what Kennedy said yes to that night would lead to the most heartbreaking betrayal imaginable. A betrayal that would leave her pregnant, abandoned, and choosing between the man who destroyed her heart and the dangerous ex who wanted to rebuild it. Have you ever had a friend ask you for something that would change everything between you forever? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. You want me to carry your child? Kennedy's voice cracked as she stared at her childhood best friend on that Atlanta rooftop. The same man who held her tight when she was 12 and crying over her mother's overdose. The same Julian who promised he'd always protect her. Now he was asking her to bear his heir. Have you ever had a friend ask you for something that would change everything between you forever? Something so crazy that saying yes could destroy the friendship you've built your whole life on? That's exactly what happened to Kennedy Thompson, a 24-year-old from Chicago's South Side, working double shifts at Waffle House just to survive. Her best friend Julian, the tech billionaire who built a multi-million-dollar AI company after dropping out of Stanford, didn't want love or marriage anymore. He wanted a biological legacy with the one person he trusted. What would you do if your best friend asked you to sacrifice everything for their dream? Would you risk losing the most important relationship in your life? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. This story will challenge everything you think you know about friendship, loyalty, and the price of desperation. Because what Kennedy said yes to that night would lead to the most heartbreaking betrayal imaginable. A betrayal that would leave her pregnant, abandoned, and choosing between the man who destroyed her heart and the dangerous ex who wanted to rebuild it. Now let me take you back to where this impossible request began and show you how a simple friendship turned into the most complicated love triangle you've ever heard. Kennedy's feet were killing her. 12 hours at Waffle House, and she'd made exactly $73 in tips. Enough to cover groceries, but not enough to stop the eviction notice from haunting her thoughts. She climbed the 3 flights to her studio apartment in East Atlanta, keys jingling against her exhausted fingers. The hallway smelled like old carpet and someone's burnt dinner. This wasn't the life she dreamed of when she won that coding scholarship 7 years ago. She pushed open her door and froze. Julian Montenegro sat on her second-hand couch, looking completely out of place in his $1,000 suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His Italian leather shoes probably cost more than her rent. He looked up from his phone with those familiar green eyes that used to comfort her through everything. Jules, her voice came out smaller than she intended. What are you doing here? He stood up, all 6 feet of him commanding the tiny space. I needed to see you. They hadn't spoken in 4 months. Not since his company went public, and he became too busy for their weekly calls. Not since she stopped being able to pretend his success didn't make her feel left behind. You could have called, she said, dropping her purse and trying to ignore how good he looked. How much older and more powerful he seemed. This isn't a phone conversation, Ken. He used her childhood nickname, the one that always made her feel safe. I need to ask you something important. She kicked off her work shoes and noticed him watching her movements. There was something different in his expression. Desperate, maybe. Vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen since they were kids. I'm listening. Julian took a deep breath, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. My board is pressuring me to settle down. They think it'll make me more trustworthy for investors. More stable. Kennedy nodded, confused about where this was going. But I don't trust anyone enough for marriage. I've seen what love does to people, how it destroys them. His voice got quieter. Except I want a legacy. A child, someone to carry on what I've built. Her heart started racing. Julian, what are you asking me? He looked directly into her eyes, and she saw the boy who used to call her crying after his parents' fights. I need you to have my baby. The room went silent except for the hum of her ancient air conditioner. Kennedy stared at Julian like he'd lost his mind. You're joking. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She sank into the chair across from him, memories flooding back. 7 years ago, when she was 17 and he was 18, volunteering at a nonprofit coding boot camp in Chicago, she'd won a national scholarship. the smart girl from the projects who was going to change her family story. Julian had been her mentor, this rich kid from Palo Alto who actually cared about teaching inner-city kids. While other volunteers treated it like community service to pad their college applications, Julian stayed late to help her debug code and listen when she talked about her dreams. Remember when my grandmother died? Kennedy's voice was barely a whisper. Julian's expression softened. You call me at 3 a.m., sobbing so hard I could barely understand you. You flew to Chicago the next morning, missed your Stanford interview to be at her funeral. She raised you. Of course I came. That was Julian, the boy who sent her care packages during finals week, who FaceTimed her every Sunday when she felt homesick, who celebrated harder than anyone when she got her first coding job. But then his startup took off. The Sunday calls became monthly. The care packages stopped. Kennedy watched from afar as Julian's face appeared on magazine covers and tech blogs, always with some gorgeous woman on his arm. Meanwhile, she was here. 2 jobs, no degree, watching her dreams shrink with every rent payment. Why me, she asked. You could have anyone, because you're the only person who knew me before the money, before the company. You're the only one who never wanted anything from me except friendship. Julian leaned forward. I trust you with my life, Ken. I always have. The way he said it made her chest tight. This was still the boy who held her when she cried about her mother's overdose, who promised he'd always protect her, who made her believe she was worth something when the whole world told her she wasn't. What exactly are you asking me to do? Carry my child. I'll take care of everything. Medical bills, living expenses, whatever you need. After the baby's born, you can be as involved as you want. Or not at all. Your choice. Kennedy's mind was spinning. A way out of poverty. A chance to help the person who'd helped her survive her darkest moments. But what cost? I need time to think. Julian nodded, pulling out his phone. I fly back to San Francisco tomorrow night. But Ken, he paused at her door. I meant what I said. I'll always take care of you. Kennedy didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window, watching Atlanta skyline and thinking about Julian's offer. By morning, she made her decision. She called him at 7 a.m. I'll do it, she said without preamble. But I have conditions. Name them. Not over the phone. Meet me at Piedmont Park in an hour. They sat on a bench overlooking the lake, joggers and dog walkers creating a normal backdrop for their surreal conversation. Julian wore jeans and a t-shirt, looking more like the boy she remembered. First condition, Kennedy said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I want everything in writing. Legal contracts, medical decisions, financial arrangements. All of it. Done. Second, I want to be involved in the child's life. Not just as a surrogate, as a mother. Julian hesitated. Ken, that could get complicated. That's my condition. Take it or leave it. Okay, what else? Kenny took a deep breath. This was a hard part. Third, we do this naturally. No doctors, no procedures, no clinical bullshit. Julian's eyes widened. You mean? I mean exactly what I mean. If you want me to carry your child, we do it the way nature intended. Her voice was steadier than she felt. I won't have your baby conceived in some sterile lab. If we're going to do this, it means something. Kennedy, that changes everything between us. I know. She looked at him directly. But those are my terms. I'm not some incubator you can pay to use. I'm a woman who's about to give you the most precious gift imaginable. The least you can do is treat it with the respect it deserves. Julian was quiet for a long moment, watching the ducks on the water. You know, with you, it will be different. Different how? You matter to me, more than anyone ever has. His voice was rough. If we cross that line, there's no going back. Kennedy felt her heart pounding. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe not. He turned to face her completely. But what if it ruins us? What if I lose the best friend I've ever had? What if you don't? She whispered. They stared at each other, years of history and unspoken feelings hanging between them. Kennedy saw the exact moment Julian made his decision. Okay, he said quietly. Your way. Relief flooded through her. Really? But Ken, I need you to be sure. Once we do this, everything changes. Our friendship, our dynamic, everything. I'm sure. She reached for his hand. When? Tonight. My hotel room. If you're still certain. Kennedy squeezed his fingers. "I've never been more certain of anything." But even as she said it, a small voice in her head wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Because crossing that line with Julian Montenegro would either save her or destroy her completely. And she was about to find out which. Kennedy stood outside Julian's hotel room at the Four Seasons, her hand raised to knock. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. She changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that made her feel confident. Her palms were sweaty, her stomach in knots. This was Julian, her best friend, the person who knew her better than anyone. The door opened before she could knock. "Hey," Julian said softly. He'd changed too, into dark jeans and a white button-down that made his eyes look impossibly green. "Hey yourself." He stepped aside to let her in. The suite was gorgeous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a bottle of wine breathing on the coffee table, soft music playing from hidden speakers. "You didn't have to do all this," Kennedy said, suddenly nervous. "I wanted to. This isn't just." He ran a hand through his hair. "This matters, Ken. You matter." She walked to the window, needing distance to think clearly. "I am scared, Jules." "So am I." His voice was right behind her. "But not of what you think." "What do you mean?" "I'm not scared of sleeping with you. I'm scared of how much I want to." Kennedy turned around, and he was closer than she'd expected. Close enough to smell his cologne, to see the gold flecks in his green eyes. "How long?" she whispered. "How long what? How long have you wanted to?" Julian's jaw tightened. "Since the day I left Chicago. Since I realized I wasn't just losing a friend. I was losing the only woman who ever made me feel like I was worth something beyond my bank account." "Julian, I know this is crazy. I know I have no right to ask you for this. But I've thought about you every single day for 7 years. Wondered what would happen if I'd been brave enough to stay. If I'd been brave enough to tell you how I felt." Kennedy's breath caught. "You never said anything. Because I was a coward. Because I thought you deserved better than some rich kid who didn't know how to love anyone properly." His hands came up to frame her face. "But maybe this is our chance. Maybe this is how we find out what we could have been." She reached up and covered his hands with hers. "What if we're making a huge mistake? Then we'll make it together." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Are you sure about this? Really sure?" Instead of answering, Kennedy stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. Soft at first, then deeper when she felt him respond. 7 years of friendship, of wondering, of missed opportunities poured into that kiss. "I'm sure," she whispered against his lips. What happened next was tender and passionate and completely different from anything Kennedy had ever experienced. Julian was patient, gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When it was over, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "No matter what happens," Julian murmured into her hair, "I want you to know that tonight meant everything to me." Kennedy smiled, pressing a kiss to his chest. "To me too." But as she drifted off to sleep in his arms, she had no idea that by morning, everything would change. That the man holding her so tenderly would disappear from her life completely, leaving her with nothing but a broken heart and a secret growing inside her. Kennedy woke up alone. The hotel room was empty, Julian's clothes gone, no note on the pillow. Just the faint scent of his cologne and the memory of whispered promises that suddenly felt like lies. She checked her phone. Nothing. Maybe he had an early flight, she told herself, getting dressed with shaking hands. But deep down she knew. She'd given him everything, and he'd taken it and run. The next week crawled by. Kennedy checked her phone obsessively, jumping every time it buzzed. But it was always work, or her landlord, or Tasha asking if she was okay. Never Julian. By the second week, worry turned to hurt. By the third, hurt turned to anger. By the fourth, anger turned to something worse, shame. Had she misread everything? Had that night meant nothing to him? Tasha found her crying in the break room at work, clutching her phone like it might suddenly ring. "Girl, what is wrong with you?" Tasha sat down beside her. "You've been walking around like a zombie for a month." "I did something stupid," Kennedy whispered. "How stupid?" "I slept with Julian." Tasha's eyes went wide. Your billionaire best friend Julian? The one who's been ignoring you for months. Kennedy nodded, fresh tears spilling over. And let me guess, he ghosted you after? It wasn't supposed to be like that. He said it meant everything to him. He held me all night, Tasha. He made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. Then why hasn't he called? I don't know. Kennedy's voice cracked. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he realized he made a mistake. Maybe I'm just some poor girl he felt sorry for. Tasha grabbed her shoulders. Don't you dare talk about yourself like that. You are brilliant and beautiful, and if Julian Montenegro is too stupid to see that, then he doesn't deserve you. But Kennedy couldn't stop the spiral of self-doubt. She replayed that night over and over, looking for signs she'd missed. Had she been too eager? Too desperate? Had she ruined the best friendship she'd ever had for one night of passion? The worst part was the silence. Not just from Julian, but from her own body. She felt different, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Her breasts were tender, her stomach queasy in the mornings. But she pushed those thoughts away. It was stress, she told herself. Heartbreak, the body's way of processing emotional trauma. It couldn't be what she was afraid it might be. Could it? 2 months. 8 weeks of complete silence from the man who'd promised to always take care of her. 8 weeks of wondering if she'd imagined the tenderness in his voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious. 8 weeks of trying to convince herself that the nausea and exhaustion were just from working too hard, until the morning she couldn't deny it anymore. Kennedy stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, her hands trembling so hard she could barely hold it steady. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Julian Montenegro's baby, and he hadn't spoken to her in 2 months. This can't be happening, she whispered to her empty bathroom. This can't be real. But it was real. The nausea, the exhaustion, the way her body felt foreign to her. It all made sense now. She was carrying the child of a man who disappeared from her life like she'd never mattered at all. She needed to tell him. Whatever his reasons for leaving, he deserved to know. This changed everything. Kennedy grabbed her phone and scrolled to Julian's number. Her finger hovered over the call button for 10 minutes before she finally pressed it. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same thing. Julian, it's Kennedy. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I have something important to tell you. Please call me back. She hung up and sat on her couch, staring at the phone. Maybe he'd call back. Maybe he'd explain why he'd left. Maybe they could figure this out together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. Girl, turn on E! News right now. Kennedy frowned, grabbing the remote. News was playing some entertainment gossip she didn't care about. She was about to change the channel when she saw a familiar face. Julian. He was walking down a red carpet in Los Angeles, looking devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo. But he wasn't alone. A stunning blonde woman in a silver dress was on his arm, smiling and posing for photographers. Tech billionaire Julian Montenegro made his relationship with supermodel Vanessa came official last night at the AI Innovation Awards, the reporter announced. Sources say the couple has been dating for 3 months and that an engagement announcement could be coming soon. Kennedy felt the world tilt. 3 months. He'd been dating this woman for 3 months, which meant her phone rang. Tasha, Ken, please tell me you didn't see. I saw. Kennedy's voice was flat, emotionless. Baby, I'm so sorry. I thought you should know before someone else told you. 3 months. While Kennedy was falling for him, giving him her virginity, believing his promises about how much she meant to him, he was dating a supermodel. I'm pregnant, Kennedy said quietly. Silence on the other end. Did you hear me? I'm pregnant with his baby. Oh, honey. Oh, no. Kennedy started laughing, a bitter sound that turned into sobbing. I'm so stupid, Tasha. I'm so fucking stupid. No, you're not. He's the one who. I believed him. I believed every word he said. About caring for me, about that night meaning everything to him. And the whole time, he was with her. Kennedy looked at the pregnancy test sitting on her coffee table, then at the TV where Julian was kissing his supermodel girlfriend for the cameras. The contrast was almost funny. The poor girl from Chicago, pregnant and alone, watching the father of her child celebrate his perfect life with his perfect woman. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. We'll figure it out. Together. How? I can barely pay my rent. I'm about to get evicted. I work at fucking Waffle House. Tasha, how am I supposed to raise a baby? You'll figure it out. You always do. But Kennedy wasn't sure she could. Not this time. Not when the man she trusted with everything had just proved that she meant nothing to him. She turned off the TV and threw the pregnancy test in the trash. Then she sat in her dark apartment, one hand on her still flat stomach, and tried to figure out how to survive the biggest betrayal of her life. Because Julia Montenegro had just shown her exactly what she was worth to him. Nothing. 3 weeks later, Kennedy was living in survival mode. She'd stopped calling Julian, stopped checking his social media, stopped torturing herself with pictures of him and Vanessa at charity galas and tech conferences. The engagement rumors were getting stronger, and Kennedy couldn't bear to see the official announcement when it came. Instead, she focused on the practical problems, like the fact that she was 3 months pregnant and could barely afford food. Her morning sickness was brutal. She'd thrown up twice during her shift at Waffle House, claiming it was the flu. Her manager, Carol, wasn't buying it anymore. "Kennedy, you've had the flu for 3 weeks," Carol said after catching her dry heaving in the bathroom. "What's really going on?" "I'm Fina. Just tired." "You're pregnant, aren't you?" Kennedy's silence was answer enough. "How far along?" 3 months. Carol sighed. "Look, I like you, kid, but I can't have you puking on customers' food. You need to tell me what's going on so I can help you." Kennedy almost laughed. Help her? She was a pregnant waitress with no college degree, no savings, and a baby daddy who'd ghosted her for a supermodel. What kind of help was there for someone like her? "I'll be fine," she said, splashing cold water on her face. "It's just morning sickness. It'll pass." But it didn't pass. If anything, it got worse. Kennedy lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, surviving on crackers and ginger ale. Her tips suffered because she couldn't smile and flirt with customers when she felt like death. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. 30 days to pay $1,200 in back rent or get out. Kennedy stared at the paper, doing math in her head. Even if she worked every single shift available, she couldn't make that much. Not with her tips down and her appetite gone. She sat on her couch, looking around the tiny apartment that had never felt like home but was all she had. Where'd she go? What would she do? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you might need a friend. M." Kennedy's heart stopped. M. Marcus. Her ex-boyfriend from Chicago. The one who'd been in prison for the past 2 years. The one who'd written her letters she'd never answered. How did he get her number? How did he know she was in trouble? Before she could think too hard about it, her phone rang. Same unknown number. "Hello, Kennedy. It's Marcus." His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher. Prison had changed him. "How did you get this number?" "I have my ways. More importantly, I heard you're in some trouble. I'm Fina." "Baby, you don't sound fine. You sound like you're drowning." Kennedy closed her eyes. She was drowning. Had been for months. "What do you want, Marcus?" "To help you. I'm out now, clean, got a job in Atlanta. I heard about your situation." "What situation?" "The billionaire who knocked you up and left you hanging." Kennedy's blood ran cold. "How do you know about that?" "I told you, I have my ways. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Kennedy hung up on Marcus, but he called back immediately. "Don't hang up on me," he said when she answered. "I'm trying to help you. I don't need help from you." "You sure about that? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you need help from somebody." Kennedy wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She was 3 months pregnant, behind on rent, and completely alone. Pride wasn't going to feed her baby. "What kind of help?" she asked quietly. "The kind that gets you out of that shitty apartment and into somewhere safe. The kind that makes sure you and your baby are taken care of." "And what do you want in return?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. A chance. A real chance this time. Kennedy remembered Marcus from high school. Tall, handsome, dangerous in a way that had thrilled her 17-year-old self. He'd been dealing then, running with the wrong crowd, but he'd been gentle with her. Protective, until he'd gotten arrested for armed robbery and sent away for 3 years. "Marcus, I can't. We're not the same people we were." "No, we're not. Prison changed me, Kennedy. Made me realize what I lost when I lost you. I've been clean for 18 months, got a job at a construction company, saved up enough for a real apartment. I can take care of you." I'm pregnant with another man's baby. I know, and I don't care. That baby needs a father, and you need a man who won't abandon you when things get hard. Kennedy felt tears stinging her eyes. Marcus, I love you, Kennedy. I never stopped, and I know you don't love me back. Not yet. But I'm willing to work for it. I'm willing to prove I'm not the same stupid kid who threw everything away. There was something in his voice, something desperate and honest that made her chest tight. Marcus had always been able to do that, make her feel like she mattered, like she was worth fighting for. Where are you? She asked. Downstairs. Kennedy's heart jumped. What? I'm in the parking lot. Have been for an hour, trying to work up the courage to come up. She walked to her window and looked down. Sure enough, there was Marcus leaning against a black pickup truck, phone pressed to his ear. He'd filled out in prison, gotten bigger and stronger. But even from 3 floors up, she could see he was nervous. Kennedy, his voice was soft. Can I come up? Just to talk. She looked around her apartment, at the eviction notice on her coffee table, at the pregnancy test in the trash, at the life she'd built that was falling apart. Okay, she whispered, but just to talk. Just to talk, he agreed. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on her door. Kennedy opened it to find Marcus holding a bag of groceries and looking at her like she was something precious. You look beautiful, he said softly. I look like hell. You look like the woman I've been dreaming about for 3 years. He held up the bag. I brought real food. Thought you might be hungry. Kennedy stepped aside to let him in, wondering if she was making another mistake. But as Marcus unpacked fresh fruit and vegetables, talking about his job and his plans for the future, she realized something. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in San Francisco, Julian Montenegro was having the worst day of his life. He sat in his corner office, staring at the contract his lawyer had just handed him, the one that proved everything he believed for the past 4 months was a lie. Tell me again how this happened, Julian said, his voice deadly quiet. His lawyer, David, shifted uncomfortably. Your board orchestrated the entire thing. They felt your bachelor image was hurting the company's family-friendly rebrand. They hired Vanessa Kane to play your girlfriend, with the understanding that it would lead to a fake engagement. And I was never told about this. They assumed you'd figured it out. The way you went along with everything, the public appearances, the interviews where you talked about settling down, they thought you were on board. Julian's hands clenched into fists. I went along with it because I thought she actually cared about me. I thought I was finally moving on from. He stopped himself. From Kennedy. From the woman he'd left in Atlanta because he was a coward who couldn't handle how much she meant to him. There's more, David said carefully. Vanessa's been feeding stories to the press about your relationship. The engagement rumors, the wedding planning. All of it's been carefully planted to boost your stock price before the IPO. Julian stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. How much? What do you mean? How much do they pay her? $2 million, plus bonuses for every major story placement. Julian felt sick. While he'd been falling for a woman who was literally paid to pretend to love him, Kennedy had been. He'd been so focused on protecting himself from getting hurt that he'd hurt the one person who'd never asked him for anything. I need you to find someone for me, Julian said, turning back to David. Sir, Kennedy Thompson. She lives in Atlanta. I need to know everything. Where she works, where she lives, if she's okay. David made a note. May I ask why? Because I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I need to fix it. 2 hours later, David called with his report. It wasn't good. She's 3 months behind on rent, working at a Waffle House in East Atlanta. Her manager says she's been sick a lot lately, missing shifts. And sir, there's something else. Julian's stomach dropped. What? She's been seen with a man. Marcus Williams, recently released from prison. They've been spending a lot of time together. Julian closed his eyes. Of course Kennedy had moved on. She was beautiful, smart, kind. Why would she wait for someone who treated her like garbage? I want a plane ready in 2 hours, Julian said. Sir, are you sure that's wise? You have the board meeting tomorrow and the IPO. Fuck the IPO. Fuck the board. I should have done this months ago. Julian hung up and started packing. He'd been a coward once, and it had cost him everything. He wouldn't make that mistake again. But as his plane lifted off from SFO, Julian had no idea what he was flying into. He didn't know about the pregnancy test in Kennedy's trash. He didn't know about Marcus's promises to take care of her. He didn't know that the woman he'd left behind was now choosing between the man who'd abandoned her and the man who'd never let her go. All he knew was that he'd spent 4 months living a lie, and he needed to tell Kennedy the truth before it was too late. The question was, would she still want to hear it? Kennedy was folding baby clothes when she heard the knock. Not the gentle tap of a neighbor or delivery person. This was urgent, demanding, the kind of knock that meant trouble. She opened the door to find Julian standing there, his face a mix of fury and desperation. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He looked like he'd driven straight from the airport. "Where the hell have you been?" His voice was rougher than she'd ever heard it. "Julian?" Kennedy's hand instinctively went to her rounded belly. At 7 months pregnant, she couldn't hide anymore. "What are you doing here? I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Kennedy. Do you know what that did to me? You've been looking for me?" She laughed bitterly. "That's rich. Where were you 4 months ago when I needed you?" "I can explain." "No." Kennedy started to close the door, but Julian's hand stopped her. "You don't get to show up here now and act like you care." "I do care. I've always cared." "Bullshit." The word came out sharper than she intended. "You cared so much you got engaged to some supermodel 2 weeks after sleeping with me." Julian's face crumpled. "Kennedy, that engagement was fake. My board staged the whole thing for the IPO. I had no idea they were planning it until I saw the headlines." "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth. I fired half my board when I found out. The engagement's been called off for months." He was talking fast now, desperate to make her understand. "I've been trying to find you since the day I got back from that publicity nightmare." Kennedy wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But she'd spent months building walls around her heart, and she wasn't ready to tear them down. "It doesn't matter," she said quietly. "You left. You disappeared for 2 months without a word. Do you know what that did to me? I know I messed up." "You didn't mess up, Julian. You destroyed me." Tears were sliding down her cheeks now. "I gave you everything. My body, my heart, my trust. And you threw it away like it meant nothing. It meant everything to me." His voice broke. "Kennedy, that night was the most important night of my life. I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because I cared too much." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means I was terrified. Terrified of how much I loved you. Terrified of how much I needed you. I convinced myself you were better off without me. That I'd only hurt you more if I stayed." He ran both hands through his hair. "I was an idiot. The biggest idiot in the world." Kennedy wiped her eyes, trying to stay strong. "You're right. You were an idiot. But I'm not the same girl who fell for your pretty words anymore. I can see that." Julian's gaze moved to her belly, and his expression shifted to something like wonder. "Is it?" "Yes, it's yours." Kennedy's voice was flat. "Congratulations, Julian. You got what you wanted." "What I wanted?" He looked genuinely confused. "Kennedy, I wanted you. The baby was just an excuse to get close to you again. I've been in love with you since we were kids." Before Kennedy could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway behind her. Marcus appeared, his tall frame filling the doorway. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, but there was something protective and dangerous in his posture. "Everything okay, baby?" Marcus asked, his arms sliding around Kennedy's waist. Julian's face went white. "Who the hell is this?" "This is Marcus," Kennedy said, leaning into his embrace. "My boyfriend." The silence that followed was deafening. Julian stared at Marcus like he was seeing a ghost, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Your boyfriend?" Julian's voice was deadly quiet. "You're pregnant with my child, and you're with him?" Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. "That's right. And if you know what's good for you, you'll turn around and walk away." "Like hell I will." Julian's corporate composure was cracking. "That's my baby she's carrying." "Your baby?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Where were you when she was throwing up every morning? When she couldn't afford prenatal vitamins? When she was working double shifts while pregnant because you abandoned her?" Julian's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about." I know what it looks like when a woman's been broken by someone she trusted. Marcus's voice was low, threatening, and I know what happens to men who hurt her. Kennedy felt the tension crackling between them like electricity. Stop, both of you. But neither man was listening. They were staring at each other with the kind of hatred that could explode into violence at any second. You need to leave, Kennedy said to Julian. Now, I'm not going anywhere. Julian's green eyes were fierce. That's my child, Kennedy. My blood. You can't just keep me away. Watch me. Kennedy couldn't sleep. For 3 days since Julian's confrontation with Marcus, she'd been replaying every word, every look, every moment of tension. Now, she sat in her living room at 2 a.m., one hand on her belly, trying to figure out how her life had become so complicated. Marcus was sleeping in the bedroom, but she could hear him tossing and turning. The stress was getting to him too. He'd been nothing but patient and loving since Julian showed up, but she could see the worry in his eyes. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. I'm not giving up on you. On us. On our baby. Kennedy stared at the message, her heart racing. Part of her wanted to respond, to tell him everything she'd been feeling. But another part of her, the part that had been hurt so badly, wanted to delete his number and pretend he'd never come back. Can't sleep? Marcus's voice made her jump. He was standing in the doorway, wearing nothing but boxer shorts, his muscled chest marked with old scars from his time in prison. The baby's been kicking, she lied. Marcus sat down beside her, his large hand covering hers on her belly. You're thinking about him. It wasn't a question. Kennedy nodded, unable to lie to him completely. I get it, Marcus said quietly. He's the father. He's rich, successful, probably everything you thought you wanted when you were younger. Marcus, no, let me finish. His brown eyes were serious. I know what I am, Kennedy. I know what I've done. I'm an ex-con with a record who can't give you the kind of life he can. That's not what matters to me. Isn't it? Marcus turned to face her fully. Baby, I've watched you struggle for months. I've seen you count every dollar, worry about every bill. I love you, but I can't pretend I don't see how you look at him. Kennedy's throat tightened. How do I look at him? Like you're still in love with him. Like you never stopped. The words hit her like a physical blow because they were true. Despite everything Julian had done, despite all the pain and abandonment, she still loved him. She'd never stopped loving him. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be sorry. Be honest. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. With me and with yourself. What do you really want? Kennedy started crying then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. I don't know. I'm so confused. I love you, Marcus. You've been everything to me these past months. You saved me when I had nothing. But Julian, she wiped her eyes. He's been in my heart since I was 17. I tried to get over him, tried to move on, but seeing him again brought back everything I thought I'd buried. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What about the baby? I don't know. Julian wants to be involved, but I'm scared. What if he disappears again? What if he decides fatherhood is too hard and walks away? What if he doesn't? Kennedy looked at him in surprise. You want me to give him a chance? I want you to be happy, really happy, not just surviving, but thriving. Marcus cupped her face gently. I love you enough to want what's best for you, even if it's not me. Marcus, no, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you. He kissed her forehead. That baby deserves a father who wants to be there, and you deserve a chance to find out if Julian's really changed. Kennedy felt her heart breaking. What about us? If you choose him and it doesn't work out, I'll be here. I'll always be here for you. Marcus's smile was sad but genuine. But if you choose him and it does work out, I'll disappear. I won't be the reason your family falls apart. I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. You deserve everything good in this world. Marcus stood up, pulling her with him. But first, you need to decide what you really want. And then you need to fight for it. Kennedy nodded, knowing he was right. Tomorrow, she would have to make the hardest choice of her life. And whatever she decided would change everything forever. Kennedy was walking out of her doctor's appointment when the pain hit. Sharp, sudden, like someone had stabbed her in the abdomen. She doubled over in the parking lot, her hands clutching her belly. Help, she whispered, but no one was around to hear her. The pain came again, stronger this time. Kennedy fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed Marcus's number. "Baby? What's wrong?" "Something's wrong with the baby," Kennedy gasped. "I'm at the doctor's office. The pain. Marcus, I am scared. I'm on my way. Don't move." But Kennedy was already collapsing to her knees. The world was spinning, black spots dancing in her vision. She managed to hit another number before everything went dark. When she woke up, she was in a hospital bed with wires and tubes everywhere. Her first instinct was to check her belly to make sure the baby was still there. The relief when she felt movement was overwhelming. Thank God, Julian's voice made her turn. He was sitting in a chair beside her bed, his face pale and drawn. "You scared the hell out of me." "Julian, what are you doing here?" "You called me, right before you passed out." His green eyes were red-rimmed. "I drove here doing 90 the whole way." Kennedy looked around the room. "Where's Marcus?"